Retro Future.
Good day, ladies and gentlemen. This is Bonsert of Radio Retro Future, and I want to talk a little bit about writing dialogue because I do get a lot of questions on that topic. But first, of course, we are doing a Kickstarter for the Association of Ishtar. Link is down below in the screen, and I really do hope you will support it, even if it's just for $1. And speaking of which, we currently also have a special birthday offer, as it is Radio Retro Future's 7th anniversary. I really hope you will support it. We already made the goal. We did so in less than 8 hours. We also got a Kickstarter project we love, which I'm very proud of. I even made some little art for it with Anwen. And yeah, I hope you will really support me and help me reach my personal goal, which is a minimum of 3,000, because that would cover most of the costs for upcoming book Bound for the Sticks. And of course, if you are a backer, not only will you get your rewards, you will also get other updates, which will include some free audio, some free ebooks. So there's no reason not to back it. And of course, everything that is made for the series of the Association of Ishtar also include in my videos as these graphics you see right now. With that being said, let's talk a little bit about writing dialogue. Writing dialogue is one of those things you gotta have a feeling for, and it's also a moment for you as an author to show your particular style, which is like, how do you depict your characters, how do they speak? And for me, of course, because I write in the steampunk genre and the characters are 19th century, I try to include a lot of like 19th century slang without it becoming like unclear what it is about. So if you use difficult words that characters use, I try to put them in a context that it's obvious, that either it adds flair, but it's not important for the reader to know what it actually means, or that it can be inferred from the character's dialogue itself. So, one series that I really love is Deadwood. It's probably one of my favorite series. It's on HBO. Not only is it a great Western series, it's one of my favorite series, period. And one of the reasons is the dialogue, which is very, well, it's not authentic 19th century, but it comes across as 19th century. And that is like the trick, that you fool your reader, or immerse your reader rather, into the dialogue, that it actually gets a sense that these are characters from a different time or a different world. Now, one of the things I don't like, and I read something by somebody, for example, that uses all these in-universe terms, like complex Latin names and stuff like that, and it really, really is distracting to me at that point. Now, I use a lot of makeshift words, especially in Bound for the Sticks, because it is an alien world, but the term scav, it doesn't take a lot of imagination to figure out that it is derived from the word scavenger, and of course the word kib. Those are very small words. They're very intuitive, and I think that people, at least for me, I never felt distracted by it when I read back my words. I haven't heard anyone complain about me using those words. So that type of terminology is that you keep your terminology simple, and this goes for general narrative statements as well. Speaking of narrative statements, is one of the things that, and I struggle with myself, by the way, is that people separate dialogue, spoken words, from the overall sentence. Now, dialogue is a very interesting beast. For those who read my article on how to write a sentence, know that I describe every sentence as an action. In every sentence, something must happen. I write my sentences as if I would a comic book. But how does dialogue fit into that? Well, dialogue, when a character speaks, that's an action. And in the terms of a sentence is that what the character says is actually part of one sentence. You just mark it as, well, this is, the character says ... and you put like the the markings around it to indicate that they're speaking. However, it's actually the same sentence. And it's especially important when you write audio for audiobooks, when you say, well, the character says, this is not a very structured video. And it's important to see that sentence as a whole. You know, this character says, there's a bunny near the window. You know, that's one sentence. And in that regard, the action is the character says that specific thing. So that's how you can compartmentalize dialogue or include it. That's how sentences are included in your sentence. So if you have a sentence that says, oh, a character picks up a pipe, and then the next sentence is, this is a bunny, it feels weird, you know, because the spoken text actually refers to the previous sentence. So there needs to be a cohesive connection there. Probably not the best example that I just used, but I hope I conveyed the idea. So, and also one other thing is, you know, a lot of people don't like to include things like the character says, he said, she said, the character scoffs or something, and then the dialogue comes. There are a couple of ways to get around that. First of all, you need to be clear. You know, I read for clarity. And what I mean by that is that I try to emphasize whenever a character is speaking. And I especially noticed this when I was recording my own audiobooks, that, you know, when you have what some writers do is like, oh, dialogue, 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 dialogue. And just because there's a separate line, you know, it means that the character switches. Just like normal sentences. You know, when a new line starts and a different character is speaking. But the thing is, if you do that too much, you simply lose track of things. And this is especially annoying if you are thinking about readers who scan text rather than read them all, you know. Because you are forcing a character to go back down the dialogue line to see who is speaking at what given moment. So, when I want to save words, you know, when I have a quick conversation, when I want to have like a high tempo in the conversation of characters responding back and forth at each other, then I might not indicate like, oh, this person... I might not indicate who's speaking at that particular line. But when you are, you know, you have a scanning reader, goes down the line, it becomes annoying. It becomes like very hard to follow who's reading what. And the last thing I want, and this is truly part of my writing philosophy, is I don't want readers to get lost in the text. I want them to see when, you know, they're reading a line, it's very clear in the line who is doing what, unless I want to keep up a particular tempo in the scene itself. So there's also a matter of rhythm that you need to consider. For me, rhythm is very important, and this really annoys my proofreaders because they often mark like, well, this is not correct English, and I say, well, yes, that's true. It's not efficient, or it's longer than you write it. However, because I have a certain beat in mind for that sentence and a certain beat in mind for the scene, I include those additional words. Back to dialogue. So I already emphasized, you know, that the dialogue is part of a sentence. It needs to be clear who's speaking when. I already talked about, you know, flavor. You know, dialogue is a good way to showcase your imagination and your flavor-esque. But how do you avoid the he said, she said scenario, and especially when you have like more than two characters talking? You know, if you have three characters talking, it becomes almost impossible to follow who's saying what at a given time if it's not specifically mentioned. And this becomes especially annoying when you have a scene where three characters are together in a conversation. Two of them are talking, as tends to be the case, but then a third one is trying to interject something. And I noticed myself that it becomes very hard to imagine, oh, well, now it's the other person. You know, I know as the writer, and because I can infer from the context, it's the third person who's saying something. Maybe it's because of a certain dialect, that a certain tone of phrase that you inserted into the scene that can only be said by that character. It does not feel right because it is very abrupt at that moment. I just talked about story beats and having sense have a particular rhythm, and that is definitely one of those moments where you have to take in mind that you're interrupting a particular rhythm in a conversation that needs to be emphasized. And how I do that is, instead of writing "this character says," which is a good way to solve it, by the way, in the first draft, if you just want to, get through the story. But what I often do is have the character perform a certain action. Like Bonsard is reaching for his coffee cup and is taking a sip. And then Bonsard continues saying whatever it is. Bonsard takes a sip from his coffee, and then he says something, but you do not explicitly say that he's saying it. Again, this is a very rhythm-based. It's very hard to give you a verbal demonstration of this, but again, if you have a particular rhythm in your conversation, you can get away with just having characters perform actions, like having a character walk toward the door, and then he says something. You don't need to specify. If it's clear that the line is about that character, you do not have to specify it. Of course, you got to be careful, again, to mind those rhythms, mind those beats. And then this is very intuitive. This is something that you really have to practice and get a feeling for. This is not, and again, start with short stories, practice those. Even if your short story is just a scene, that can work. Sometimes a short story is more powerful than a book in that regard. And my books are based on various short stories. A matter of fact, as you can see, those are the two I have over there. But I don't want to talk too much about my Kickstarter. So please check out the Kickstarter, check out the trailer, and it includes what I mean. I guess that's all I wanted to say about it. I probably could have made it a lot more efficient and a lot more clear. But as I said before, I assume you are all listening to this rather than actual reading it. And I really need to get a video out before I leave this weekend for a fantasy market in Voorthuizen in the Netherlands, where I'll also be promoting my Kickstarter. So I hope to make some new readers there. Next year I hope to have more books. I intend to visit more conventions in the Netherlands and in Belgium. We are planning our events, a matter of fact, so we'll see what happens. And I also should look into some more podcasts to promote the Kickstarter. I hope this at least convinces you somewhat to support the project. And with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, I'm gonna bid you adieu, and as always, make things your way. If in case I forgot, please remember we currently have a special offer because of our anniversary on Kickstarter, so go check that out. And if you want me to include certain things in future projects, let me know. And with that, goodbye.